I lose the only thing you ever trusted me to protect. So don't be wrong. Please, don't let me be wrong.
If this storm comes and it doesn't work, we lose everything your grandmother and I built.
Then trust me one more time. Just this once.
The sky over Millbrook County didn't just turn dark that afternoon, it turned violent. And out of every farmer standing in its path, only one wasn't afraid. Lightning tore across the ridge. Wind ripped through the fields, flattening rows of freshly plowed soil into rivers of mud within minutes. Trucks skidded on the county road as grown men scrambled to save what they could. And in the middle of all that panic, one field stood completely untouched, thick, green, rooted, exactly where 17-year-old Ivy Hutton had left it. 11 days earlier, they had laughed at her for it. "Girl, you're sitting on gold and you're too lazy to dig it up," one farmer had shouted from his truck window. Ivy hadn't argued. She just kept watching the sky. She had no idea that the decision everyone mocked her for was about to save every farm on Millers Creek Road, including the one that belonged to the man who laughed the loudest. Ivy Hutton had grown up on this land. Her grandfather, Walter Hutton, had farmed it for 40 years before a stroke left him unable to walk the fields anymore. Since then, it had been Ivy, barely out of high school, running 80 acres almost entirely on her own, with her grandfather calling instructions from his porch chair. People in town liked Walter. Patient. Respected. Never missed a Sunday service. But Ivy was different. She didn't smile much. She didn't explain herself. And when she made decisions, she made them alone. So when harvest season began and every farm along Millers Creek Road started plowing their lowland fields, Ivy did the opposite. She spent hours standing at the lowest point of her land, watching how water pooled after even a small rain. Her neighbor, Russell Cobb, couldn't hold his tongue. "You do know that's the best soil on this whole road," Russell said, leaning against her fence. "You're letting it sit there like it's worthless." "It's not worthless," Ivy replied, not looking up. "It's doing exactly what I need it to do," Russell laughed. "And what's that?" "Growing weeds." Ivy finally looked at him. "Growing time," she said. "We're going to need it." 10 days before the storm, Ivy walked into the County Grange Hall meeting. She rarely spoke. That evening, she raised her hand. "I think we need to talk about drainage," Ivy said. "Not harvest schedules. Drainage. The creek's been rising faster than usual after every rain this month," she continued. "If we get a real storm, every field that's been stripped bare for plowing is going to wash out." Russell stood, arms crossed. "With respect, Ivy, we've farmed this valley for generations." "You've been running this farm for what, 2 years?" the room murmured in agreement. One by one, farmers filed out, muttering about book farming. Only Ezra Bellwood stayed behind. "They didn't hear a word you said," Ezra told her gently. "I know," Ivy said. "But I had to say it anyway." The sky turns. 6 days later, the Weather Service issued its first warning. A storm system was building over the mountains, expected to stall directly above the valley. Still, most farmers didn't change their plans. The night before the storm, Ivy worked until nearly midnight, digging shallow channels along the edge of her unplowed field. Her grandfather watched from the porch, wrapped in his blanket. "You really think it's coming, don't you?" Walter said. "I know it's coming," Ivy answered, driving a stake into the mud. "I just don't know how bad." By morning, the sky had turned the color of wet ash. Wind bent the tall grass in her lower field flat against the earth, then let it spring back up again, resilient, rooted, exactly as she had planned. By late morning, the wind had grown sharp enough to rattle the barn doors. Ivy moved through the farm like she'd rehearsed this 100 times, herding the 2 dairy cows into the highest stall, tying down loose feed sacks, checking every latch twice. Her grandfather's old dog, Biscuit, paced nervously at her heels, sensing what was coming before the first drop even fell. Inside the farmhouse, Walter sat by the window, his weathered hands wrapped tightly around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. He watched his granddaughter work, and for the first time in years, he felt something other than worry. He felt certain. Your grandmother used to say the land talks to the ones who bother to listen, Walter said quietly as Ivy passed by the window. She'd be proud of you today. Ivy paused just long enough to meet his eyes. I hope she's right about the rest of it too, she said, before disappearing back into the wind. The storm arrives, the rain started just after noon and did not stop. Within 3 hours, Miller's Creek had swollen into a churning brown river, spilling into the lowland fields. Freshly plowed soil dissolved and washed away in muddy sheets. Russell Cobb stood in his driveway, watching in horror as brown water surged across his field. Move the equipment, he shouted to his son, both scrambling through the storm. But on Ivy's farm, the deep-rooted grass held the soil in place. The drainage channels redirected the rising water into the natural basin, letting it pool safely away from the barn and equipment shed. Ivy stood on her porch beside her grandfather, watching the floodwater fill her wasted field exactly the way her notebook had predicted. There it is, Walter said quietly, a faint smile breaking through the worry on his face. The storm raged for nearly 36 hours before breaking. Russell Cobb lost nearly his entire lower field to erosion. Ezra Bellwood's fences were destroyed. But Ivy's farm stood largely intact. Word spread fast. Russell walked up Ivy's driveway himself, boots caked in mud, hat in his hands. I owe you an apology, he said, not quite meeting her eyes. I called you lazy. I called you foolish. You were the only one of us who actually looked at what was coming. Ivy didn't gloat. I wasn't trying to be right, she said. I was trying to protect the land. Same as you were, just a different way of doing it. Ezra Bellwood, leaning on his cane near the fence, added, your grandfather always said the smartest farmer isn't the one who works the hardest. It's the one who listens the closest. Within a week, 3 neighboring farmers asked Ivy to help them redesign their drainage systems. Set out to prove anyone wrong. She was simply paying attention to the sky, to the soil, to the quiet signs that most people were too busy, or too certain, to notice. In a valley full of farmers who trusted tradition over observation, Ivy trusted what the land itself was telling her. And when the storm finally came, it wasn't luck that saved her farm. It was patience. It was preparation. It was the willingness to be laughed at for doing what she believed was right, long before anyone else understood why. Sometimes the wisest decision looks like doing nothing at all, until the one day it matters most.